Hello, everybody, and welcome to the August 13th Trips and Traps. I'm Andy Serling, joined by Richard Migliore.
I love the races we have to look at today. I think there's clear illustrations of just how important position is in these turf races, especially up here in Saratoga.
I agree, and especially as you have bigger fields and they get bunched up in the stretch, and sometimes you end up inside and how tough it is to get through. And we'll talk about a bunch of different races, and we'll start out with the quick call stakes, actually, and this was the ninth race on August 6th. We're going to talk about the 7 Cyclogenesis, who was coming back after a race in Europe and has some trouble in the stretch, and want to talk about it. I'll tell you what, though, Richie, this was a race that featured a very fast pace.
An extremely fast pace, and I think won by a very good horse. But I thought this was an illustration of, I don't blame Johnny Velasquez for the trip. I think he got unlucky. When you're trying to do the right thing and save ground, you need some luck. You need a break here and there, and I just don't think this horse got any breaks whatsoever.
No, I agree, and I think this is a recurring theme throughout the show, and just the races up here is finding a spot, getting a seam, bigger fields, especially in these races where you've got to come from behind. And I thought Johnny got very good position with this horse, and listen, he's a closer. I do think, though, that the 3, the Great War, also ran very well in here because he was right up on the teeth of the pace, took back a little bit. He was coming off a layup, and he came through, ended up narrowly being second here. But Cyclogenesis, and when we show the head on the stretch, Rich, you're going to see how nimble this horse is in getting through the slightest of holes.
Oh, he really is. And, I mean, Johnny's already looking for live cover. Maybe, you know, it's interesting. Maybe he didn't accelerate as much as a Great War, and that kind of caused some of the problem there because now he's kind of in that pickle where if he maybe was accelerating as fast as the 3, he would have been able to kind of get out around him. Let's take nothing away from the winner, ready for ride. But I think this is a clear illustration of where somebody go, what was he doing? He's inside. He was doing everything right and just didn't break. And 9 times out of 10 on the turf, you will find that scene.
Yeah, and you know, it also, I thought Johnny did a very good job. You talk about horses running with the emergency brake on. I thought Johnny did a very good job of continuing to move forward as much as he could, despite the fact, as you can see, he really has to make his own seam.
Yeah, well, exactly. And that's such an uncomfortable position for a rider because you got to think also, they're not running perfectly straight at that point. So you're trying to get in a spot, and they're kind of moving. It's almost liquid. It's flowing, and you're trying to get there. You're right. He's keeping them going forward. He didn't get that big pop through there, and maybe that was a little bit that the horse just didn't have the acceleration. But I thought this was a clear illustration of not a bad ride, an unlucky ride.
Yeah, no, I agree. I thought it was a very good ride. And the other thing is, I think it's just harder to move through inside of horses than moving clear on the outside. And you see how the one Disco Partner, I believe, who's an improved horse for the Generasios, he was running cleanly on the outside. He saved ground, was able to get out because he was farther back, and he was really running at the end and beat this horse. But I think it's just harder to get your momentum inside.
Well, absolutely, particularly when you've got these many fast horses bunched up. They're not like clearly somebody slowing down and you're going to get more separation. They're a group.
Well, that's also a good point. It's a 5.5 furlong race filled with good horses. They're all running fast at the end. It's not a longer distance race where you're having more tiring and more separation, and that's where you're going to see more separation when they're tiring, and it wasn't the case here.
When you get pace. We got pace there, but it was a sprint. Some of these longer races we're going to see, I think, shows the tale of position early sets up what happens late.
Right, and one we're going to talk about is the 8th race on August 7th, and this is a horse, the 4 Run of the River, who honestly should have been an unsaddled winner. A 2-to-1 favorite in this race, but a horse that just was put in a bad position from the start. And part of it is, why is he taking such an aggressive hold? Any rider that had looked at the past performances would have known that there was really no speed in here, and he loses any kind of position early.
When he broke very cleanly. He had every opportunity to go forward, and he could have been basically where the horse is laying second and behind the leader at this point and going very comfortably. Now he's completely out of position. He's created traffic for himself in front of him, and they're not going fast. So you're not going to get any separation, and the horse is keen. And you're going to see he basically never gets an opportunity to run.
No, it's really just a bad position in the race. You want to see a good position break, watch the Hall of Fame Stakes on Friday. I think it's a race actually after this. And watch the ride on Rad Ortiz gives the winner Consumer Credit, where he gets his position going forward early with a horse that's a closer, but he gets that position early and makes all the difference in the race.
Well, and that's why starts and the run to the first turn is optimum about giving yourself a chance to win. The 4 horse is never in a position to win the race. And you're going to see he's going to make multiple little moves up back into traffic and have to steady back off the heels again. And basically, in jockey parlance, Edgar Prado has to eat him.
Yeah, I mean, and also we're talking about a horse who is the 2-to-1 favorite. On paper, looked very strong. So why are you worried about saving ground? What do you care if you're too wide, stalking on the outside? Your job, in a lot of ways, with a favorite like this, is don't get in trouble.
Yeah, but he didn't give himself any options when he didn't let him run to the first turn. Then he was locked into inside position. Once they got midway through the first turn, basically he was going to be dictated the terms of the race. When you're on a live horse, you have to make sure you put yourself in a position to dictate the race and the flow of it and where you can go.
Yeah, and that is clearly not what happened here. And we're going to show the head-on the stretch. You're going to see there's no point here. He has room. Now, what if he had tried to wait a little instead of making that commitment there? Once he makes this commitment to go to the inside, now he's got zero chance to go anywhere else. Had he waited, is it possible a seam would have opened up? He gave himself no chance to get a seam opening up.
You know, it's a good question. I think the horse on the rail, I think it's Joe Bravo aboard, saw that the leader drifted out some, so he ducked back to that spot that Edgar started to point to, and basically he was beaten to that spot because he was in behind him. I think this race is just a clear illustration. If you don't get your position going forward in the first turn, you're going to tend to get a bad trip, and that's about as bad a trip as you're going to see.
Right. And you're going to become a victim, and the idea is to make it less likely you become a victim. There were some shenanigans in this race by some horses that on the first turn, and we're going to show different points of the races and different horses. And the first thing we want to show you is the start. The 10 Crown Doro is going to stumble very badly, and obviously that eliminated any chance that she had in the race. And frankly, the jockey does a terrific job staying on her. I mean, she stumbles a couple of times in there, you can see it. But also, this badly affects the race because she was a speed, and she was inside of the 12. So if she breaks sharply, she not only goes to the front, but she does it inside of the 12, and it doesn't make it that easy. Now, we want to talk about these three horses back here. The 8 who's in the middle we'll talk about later. The 1 is Unbridled Sonia, and the 11 horse is Frosty Friday. Unbridled Sonia, as you're going to see, is going to take herself out of the race and also take Frosty Friday out of the race.
She completely doesn't corner at all, but you can see here the rider's having to get up in her mouth because he's in behind horses.
Right.
And once you've got to grab a horse going into this tight 7-furlong turf course, your horse can't make the turn. They're a 1,000-pound animal, and they just, the inertia of it, they're going to get sent out. You have to let your horse be able to be in a position to drop his head and let them fall into the turn. And I think, again, much like the last race we watched, the mistake was made at the break. Unbridled Sonia broke very well. Instead of right away reaching up and grabbing her, and I got to be back, let her run enough, and whatever outruns you, but you're not going to get in a position then where you got to grab her and blow the turn like that.
And she has speed, so it's not as though she's slow. Now, maybe this is trainer instruction, but I agree with you, Richie. I don't know why you're not falling out of the gate with these horses going forward instead of falling backwards.
Yeah, and especially when a horse breaks that cleanly. And I've got post 1, even if my instructions are to rate, I'm still going to let them run the 50 yards or so to the turn, so that I don't get in a position where I'm going to have her head up in my lap and blow the turn that way and lose all chance.
I mean, this was crazy. And the other thing is she ends up running okay in here. She finishes like 6th. She actually passes horses and took herself out of the race. Forget about Frosty Friday. She had no chance. Now, we're going to talk about Flying Tippet from this point down on the inside. I don't know how much run she had, but I get the feeling not only did she get sawed off the stretch, the 5 comes over on her, but I don't feel like she ever ran without the emergency brakes. I don't think she was happy being inside, Richard.
No, she seemed very uncomfortable, and I don't fault the rider here. You know, I think you got these big competitive fields, and she's saving ground, and then she just never got in a comfortable spot, and then nearly got put into the fence inside this, just about the 16th hole.
Yeah, we'll talk about
and here,
that.
And you see the ones running through the wire here.
The one should have won this race.
The one very easily could have won the race, and my problem with the one is, again, watch the break. Why not be more aggressive?
I don't get it. I don't understand. We've seen this. We talk about all throughout the year. And once again, if you're leaving from position and they're running faster than you, then you're naturally going to get position behind them.
Absolutely. Now, you can see, I tell you what, right there, that filly was like a ballet dancer trying to get her extricate herself out of the trouble, and she kind of climbed up the fence a little. That could have been an accident, and good job by the rider and the horse getting themselves out of a terrible situation.
No, I agree. That was, I think, Corey Lannery down on the inside there, and she did have significant trouble in there.
Yeah.
This is an interesting race to look at because also the stuff that happened to start affected the race and allowed the winner, Great Walls, to win, where she got that comfortable spot and a very good ride by Eric Cancel, continuing to go forward, sensing they were going slowly. And I think this is something we've seen with Eric throughout his riding down south. It's one of the reasons he's had success up here, where it's not easy to have success. His aggression's been rewarded.
Go forward. You know, and I just to be fair, there are times you're going to get caught in a jam where you have no choice but to take a hold of a horse. When I have a problem watching is when they come out already taking a hold. You allow the horse to at least get in a rhythm, get in a stride. And then if you have to take back a little to make sure you don't get shut off or go forward a little, that gives you an option. If you come out thinking backwards already, now you're victimized.
Right. We have no chance. Right. You become a victim. And I think this is something, you know, I mean, it sounds like a broken record, but we're just seeing it over and over again. And we're going to show one more race. And it's going to be a very similar situation. Now, I'm not sure, as we look at the third race on August 10th, whether or not Lucky Leroy Brown is a horse that you want going forward, because he's got to be in a spot where he's good enough. But he was second in his prior race. But he's a horse that just loses position from start to finish.
Well, here, once again, we got post one. We actually got our head in front there coming to the wire the first time. I'm not so sure that I wouldn't have just kept going forward and put him on the lead, because if I make a decision, then everybody else is going to adjust around me. Taylor Rice chose to be patient here. She's got good position, but even at this point, you've got to be able to hold that position now. And I think her lack of aggression down the backstretch, you can see she kind of gets shuffled back out of it. And I think it's even more important, Andy, to hold position when you're on a cheaper horse, because they're not going to overcome trouble.
Right, and they're not going to fight forward for it. And the other thing, let me ask you something. Do you think, and I know that the horse who's in front is a little bit off the rail, and maybe it's a little intimidating, do you think that Taylor's overcommitting to the inside? And maybe if she had drifted off a path as they went in the turn and got in the two-pass, she would have had more options?
Well, yeah, because then she's going to go forward when that outside wave of horses comes. Instead of now, you're going to see she's going to wind up being shuffled back around the turn, completely out of position. Now, I know some people thought the two-horse might have moved a little early. Well, his hand was forced from the outside, and Manny Franco did what he had to do to hold position. It was the complete opposite of what Taylor did. And at this point, you've got to get right in behind Franco's horse and follow him. He's live cover.
And force the 5 out.
Exactly. Now the 5's got your position. Right. Where are you? You're going backwards when everybody else is going forward.
Right. I mean, here you can see her have it take a hold of the horse. And, yeah, she gets around the 7. But as you say, at this point, the 5 has the position she was supposed to be in. Now, whether or not she would have used that position, had enough horse going forward, that's just conjecture. But the point is, the horse was never given a chance to be in that spot.
Well, and that's the thing. And I thought this race was a great teaching race to watch and explain what we mean when we say about holding position and get your position going forward. That was the complete opposite. Basically, it was backwards the whole race. And then even in the stretch, the horse gave me the impression that he needed to be shook up and made to know that, hey, you got to get back in this. I think once he got shuffled out of it, he almost lost interest.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And the interesting thing about it is the dynamic in Saratoga, the two-turn races, is so much different than Belmont. And, yes, we have two-turn at Aqueduct, but you just don't have as much turf racing and as competitive turf racing as at Saratoga. And I think that's a big adjustment sometimes for riders.
A big adjustment, and the other thing you got to factor into this is that the ground has been very firm up here. We haven't had a lot of rain. We had rain Tuesday, but before that, it's been a rock hard turf course. We get to Aqueduct in 7/8 turf course. It's usually softer ground that time of year, and you pretty much have horses that handle it and horses that don't. There's a lot more separation. Right now, you've got a firm turf course. Horses are running into the turns, and the ones that aren't holding their position are basically being eliminated.
No, you're seeing it over and over again, and that's something you have to look for in watching races here, because there are horses that are going to run poorly or appear to run poorly in races, but it's not necessarily because they're not fast enough, and you've got to use it to evaluate them going forward, and there's going to be opportunities to make money if you're able to analyze these situations correctly.
Well, a few of the races we saw a horse pay $49, went wire to wire. Why is speed a bad thing?
Right, I don't know. I don't know when speed became a bad thing. I know it's a good thing if you give us some helps. It's trips and traps at NYRank.com.